Well, welcome to Raider Church. Welcome to Sandcastles Part 2. My name's Clayton Walker. I'm one of the pastors here at Raider Church. Pumped to be here with you guys tonight. Growing up, I went through this series of clothes. It was this series of name brand after name brand after name brand, okay? And I'm just gonna kind of confess to you my sin of name brand clothes that I went through. I was addicted to this stuff, okay? So the first thing was called Jabot jeans, okay? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Jabot. Okay, there's 10 of you. Okay, so I was into Jabot jeans, all right? That was if you were cool, you wore Jabot jeans, when I was in middle school and elementary even. And so I had to have Jabot jeans. They were really expensive, and I told my mom, Mom, I have to have these jeans. If I'm gonna be cool. Okay, so I went through Jabot jeans. Then it kind of transitioned into Lucky jeans. How many of you ever heard of the Lucky brand jeans? Okay, so those became popular when I was in kind of junior high and high school, and so I started wearing Lucky jeans. I wore some Tommy Hilfiger, some Polo, okay? That's the kind of clothes that I rocked. I was a little bit preppy, okay, back then. And so those are just some of the things. Now, as I got later into high school, Abercrombie & Fitch came in style. I started wanting Abercrombie & Fitch. That was what I wore. It was everything. I had the shorts, the pants, the shirts. I had everything. In fact, so much so that some of you heard my wife say a couple of weeks ago that when I was 18, I had just graduated, I started working at Abercrombie & Fitch. And I'll go ahead and admit that. I was not the guy out front, though, with his shirt off, okay? I just want to clarify that. A lot of you have asked me that. And that was not me, okay? I was never be that brave. I was inside selling the clothes and cleaning up the dressing room and stuff like that, behind the scenes stuff. So, but I worked there. Shoes, okay? It was Air Jordans, all right? Man, all the way, I loved Air Jordans, okay? Now, here's the thing though. When I got Air Jordans, the first couple of pairs I had, okay? All of a sudden, I became obsessed with shoes. And some of you know what I'm talking about. If you get a pair of Air Jordans, all of a sudden you become obsessed with them, they're the coolest things in the world. Well, here's the problem though. When they got dirty, I would freak out, okay? And I played basketball in them. So obviously, they're gonna get dirty. And even during basketball games, I remember being upset that my Air Jordans were getting dirty, okay? So here's what I did. I went home and I put together my own shoe cleaning kit, okay? Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, this is something I got persecuted for, okay? My brothers made fun of me. My parents made fun of me for having my shoe cleaning kit. And here's what it was. I just had a shoe box, and I had a squirt bottle with water in it. I had a towel, and I had a toothbrush in there, an old toothbrush. And so when my Jordans got dirty, okay, I would come home from school, I'd come home from basketball practice, I would come home, and I would clean my Air Jordans, okay? And people would laugh at me, all right? But I just kept doing it anyways because I was obsessed with these shoes. Well, then after that came Doc Martens. And I had to have Doc Martens, okay? And they were expensive, and my mom, we couldn't get them, but I would dream of having Doc Martens. And I thought, when I have Doc Martens, okay, then my life will be complete, right? And so I was praying and asking for Doc Martens for Christmas and everything else. So I finally got a pair of Doc Martens, and I thought my life was made. A couple of weeks later, they got stolen out of my locker at school. I was devastated, okay? But here's what happened. My mom had spent a bunch of money on those, and she wasn't gonna have any of that. She went up to that school. She went into that vice principal's office and she said, "You better get my son's Doc Martens back. I spent this much money and he better get them back." And so she was telling this vice principal of my middle school what it's going to be and how it's going to be and that he was going to get these shoes back. Sure enough, he got them back for me. And I had my Doc Martens back. But see, here's the thing, right? When you go from one thing to the next and you're always thinking, hey, the next thing that I get, the next item that I get, the next piece of clothing, the next car that I get, the next house that it's always that next thing. And every time you get that next thing, you realize it doesn't satisfy you. And so you need the next thing. And you need to spend more money to get the next thing. Because maybe that thing will make you happy. Maybe that car will bring you the joy and the satisfaction that you want. It'll make you feel a certain way. I battled the same thing with cars. When I was 18, probably 19, I bought a truck that I couldn't afford. And so I had to work multiple jobs. I was paying for school, college, but I was also paying for this truck that I couldn't afford. But I had to have this truck. And then I got the truck, and then what did I have to do? It was a nice black Z71. I had to jack it up and put these huge tires on it because the truck I had, it wasn't good enough, okay? So I had to put a lift on it, and I put some tires and some wheels on that thing, and then I was paying those things off because the truck I had wasn't enough. I needed more. And then after I put those things on there, well, then I need the right muffler and the right pipes coming out the back. I spent tons of money on this truck because it was never enough. And every time I did something else, I realized that didn't bring me the satisfaction I wanted. That didn't bring me the joy that didn't make me happy like I thought it was going to. It left me wanting and longing for more and more and more. And I'll be honest with you, I still battle with that to this day. Always wanting the next thing, always wanting more. Never having enough. And that's really the definition of a sandcastle. What we're talking about this series, like when you take a good thing, like my Air Jordans or the jeans or the cars, the trucks, whatever, none of that stuff was bad in and of itself, but a sandcastle is when you take something good, like a good thing, and you make it a foundational thing in that it's going to make you happy. It's going to bring you satisfaction, joy, peace, fulfillment. It's going to make you feel a certain way. That's a sandcastle. You see, Jesus said, we talked about this last week, in Matthew chapter 7, he said a lot of us are building the foundation of our lives with sand on sand. And when the storm comes, when the test comes, it's going to reveal that the foundation that we've built our lives on isn't going to last. It's all going to come crashing down. Anytime we take a good thing and we make it a foundational thing, and for a lot of us, sometimes that's stuff. It's what the Bible calls, we'll see tonight, treasure on earth, earthly treasure. When we build our foundation upon earthly treasures, you're going to find it's never enough. It will never make you happy. It will never satisfy you. It'll never bring you the joy that you thought it would. And in fact, it will always leave you longing for more. So if you got a Bible, I want you to open up to Matthew chapter 6 tonight. Matthew chapter 6, we're going to continue with our Sandcastle series. We're going to look at the second sandcastle. But before we do, I want to just kind of set this up for you again. We're in Matthew chapter 6, and Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount. It's considered to be the most famous sermon ever given in all of Christianity, like in all of church history. This is the most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. And when Jesus is preaching, he's preaching on these hills it's overlooking the Sea of Galilee. We talked about this last week. But he's got this huge crowd. Thousands of people were listening to what he had to say. And in this crowd, there were three different kinds of people. One was just the kind of a basic person. They were neutral. Jesus and the Gospels refer to them as the crowd. They were really neutral. They weren't necessarily against Jesus. They weren't totally for him. They were just interested in what he had to say. They'd seen him perform miracles. They liked the way that he taught. They liked the things that he was saying, and so they were kind of fans of Jesus. They weren't the second group, which was followers of Jesus, not yet. Some of them would come out of the crowd and become followers. But you had people in the crowd that were kind of neutral. They weren't too sure about this Jesus thing. Some of you are in the same spot tonight. You're not too sure about this whole Jesus thing, this whole church thing. You don't know what to think about it, but you're interested. You want to see what Jesus has to offer. The second group is, as I mentioned, his followers, people who had left everything to go and to follow him. They left jobs and homes and land, and they left everything. They left their lives behind to follow Jesus. They completely reoriented their lives and values around Jesus. They left everything to follow him. And then you've got this third group who were the religious types, and you would think those would be the people that were for Jesus, but they weren't. The religious types, the religious teachers of the day, they were not for Jesus. They were actually opposed to Jesus. Isn't that interesting? Because sometimes we find that still to be true to this day, that it's the religious type, it's the religious person. It's the church person that can sometimes be opposed to Jesus and to what Jesus is doing. If you're a follower of Jesus, man, don't ever get in that spot where you become so critical and so negative about what's happening around the world or in other churches or anything like that. You might find yourself being in the spot of the religious person, opposing what Jesus was actually doing and what Jesus was actually for. So you've got these three different kinds of people that are listening to Jesus preach, and Jesus' goal was to take people from out of the crowd, hopefully as he spoke to them, to take people from the crowd and turn them into followers of Jesus, or maybe to take some of those religious types that were opposed to Jesus and see their lives completely change where they begin to follow Jesus with all of their heart. So Jesus' goal was to, as he was preaching, as he was teaching to this huge crowd that was following, was to challenge them to become disciples, to become followers of Jesus, to go all in with him. And my prayer in this series and each week as you come to Raider Church is that that would be the same goal. That would be what happens in your life. That whether you're just a part of the crowd or maybe you're even in opposition to Jesus, that Jesus would do something so powerful in your life that you would go all in with Jesus and follow him with your whole heart. Maybe you've got 2 feet out right now. You don't want to have anything to do with this Jesus thing. My prayer is that by being a part of Raider Church, you'll go all in with both feet and follow Jesus. Or maybe you're in the crowd tonight, you're kind of neutral. You've got 1 foot in with Jesus, kind of 1 foot out with the world. You kind of got 1 foot in with Jesus and 1 foot kind of doing your own thing and living your life and doing things the way that you want to do them. My prayer is through this series, by being a part of Raider Church, you'll go with both feet in, all with Jesus, all in with Raider Church. So Jesus is speaking to this crowd, and in Matthew chapter 6, we're going to pick up with part of his message, with part of his sermon. We're going to see the second sandcastle this week is this. It's treasure on earth. It's our second sandcastle, and you're going to see it as we go right here, Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19. Check this out. It says, "Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and where rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal." You see, Jesus says, don't store up treasure on earth. What does that mean? Like, what is that referring to? Well, it could be money. It could be a job. It could be a job title. It could be clothes, cars, houses, things of this world. And Jesus is saying, listen, don't store up. Don't seek after, don't pursue treasure, earthly treasure here on earth, because he's saying it's a real practical reason. There's nothing wrong with these things in and of themselves, but Jesus is saying, listen, that's not a foundation to build your life upon, because those things don't last. And if that's what you're building the foundation of your life on, Jesus is saying, listen, when the storm comes, when the test comes, and it will, your foundation's going to come crashing down, because these things, treasures on earth, jobs, money, houses, cars, clothes, these things don't satisfy. They just leave you longing for more. And so Jesus says, don't store up treasure on earth, because it's not going to last. It's not going to satisfy you. Randy Alcorn said in his book, The Treasure Principle, he said this: there's a fundamental connection between our spiritual lives and how we think and handle money or stuff, material things, treasure on earth. He said, we may try to divorce our faith and our finances, but God sees them as inseparable. You see, our faith in Jesus should affect the way that we handle our money, our finances. It should affect the way that we view material things, treasures on earth. So how can you tell if you're storing up treasure on earth? Well, number one, maybe you've got consumer debt. Consumer debt would refer to a credit card that you put things like clothes or vacations or meals or things like that on. You have credit card debt, consumer debt. And the reason this points to treasuring things on earth is because you're saying, when you use a credit card, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, listen, I don't have the cash for that now, but I want it now, I need it now. And so instead of saving for something, we charge it. That points to having a struggle with treasure on earth. And listen, I'm not telling you something that I haven't struggled with in my life before. My wife and I, Dar, when we first got married, we had some credit card debt. We had some unwise spending practices until God began to speak to us, and we turned from that, and we began to radically pay off debt. And there's been times where we've tripped up and we've fallen again, but we've continued to pay off those debts because we believe that to have consumer debt, to have credit card debt, it's just telling Jesus, we need this thing, we want this thing now, even if we can't afford it. So consumer debt. Maybe you don't Sabbath. In other words, that just means you don't take a day of rest, which the Bible talks about. You don't have time for rest. Some of these things may not as much apply to you now, but they will as you get a job and you start working, you start making money. Maybe you don't see your family. You'll know as you graduate and you start working, you have a job. If you're never seeing your family, chances are you're storing up treasure on earth. You're treasuring your job, your work, your title, the money that it brings in more than your family, than what Jesus says. I've got all kinds of friends that travel and they're gone from their families and they wonder why their kids are struggling. They wonder why their wife feels alone and neglected, and they're trapped. They're trapped in a job and making a certain amount of money because they bought a house they can't afford, a car they can't afford, and they've got consumer debt, credit card debt that they can't afford. And so they have to keep this job in order to keep working, and they work all the time and they never see their family. And I'm just telling you now, before you get there, that will kill your family. If you're treasuring things on earth so much that you have to work so much to pay for all those things that you don't ever see your family. Maybe you make some unethical choices or you cut corners. That points to having treasure on earth or treasuring the things of this earth. Maybe you're unwilling to share. That would point to storing up treasure on earth. And then last, you give your leftovers, if there are any. You see, one of the ways you can tell that you're storing up treasure on earth is that you don't give to Jesus. You don't give to the Jesus mission. And maybe if and when you do, instead of prioritizing it before you do anything else, if you give, you just kind of give what's left over at the end of the month. And for a lot of us, and listen, I gave like that for a long time. There wasn't anything left over. And so I didn't give. You see, when we don't give first and allow then all of our other spending habits to kind of come secondary to what's most important, we can end up storing up treasure on earth. John D. Rockefeller was one of the richest men to ever live. And after he died, someone came and asked his accountant and said, "Hey, how much did John leave behind?" And his accountant gave this reply, and it was classic. He said, "He left behind all of it." He left behind all of it. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, dude, why are we talking about this right now? Like, I'm in college, I don't have any money. I don't have a job. Why are we talking about this right now? Here's the reason why. In all seriousness, and I want you to catch this. The reason we're talking about this now is because this starts right now. You're in college right now to get a good education so that you can get the best job, so that you can make the most money, so that you can buy the most stuff. And that's the way it goes for a lot of people, right? I mean, that's the American dream. I mean, get a good education, graduate, get your degree, get the best job, make a ton of money, buy the houses, the cars, the stuff, so that you can have the money for the lifestyle that you want to have. I mean, right? That starts right now. And listen, I want to challenge you tonight to go for it. You might be thinking, well, dude, what are you talking about? You just said something, you were just talking about something totally different than that. I know. But I want you to go for it. I want you to do the best that you can now in school so that you do get your degree, so that you do get the best job, so that you can make a ton of money, but for a different purpose, for a different mission. You see, you might remember last week, if you were here in Matthew 7, Jesus said, those who listen to him and obey his teaching build their foundation upon the rock. And so I want to show you what Jesus' answer to this lifestyle, to storing up treasure on earth. I want to show you his answer. I want to show you what Jesus has to say about this so that you can build the foundation of your life upon the rock. I want you to make the most money that you possibly can, but for a different purpose. And here's that purpose. Check this out. Jesus said this in verse 19, store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Jesus says, listen, Jesus says, he's not telling you don't store up treasure. He's telling you to store it up in a place that will last. There's a famous missionary, C.T. Studd, said this. Check this out. He said, only one life, and 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. See, I want you to make the most money that you possibly can so that you can store up treasure in heaven. How do you do that? How can you tell if you're storing up treasure? How do you store up treasure in heaven? Check this out. Number one, you give to Jesus' mission. Jesus gave us a mission as his followers to take the gospel to the ends of the earth so that people all across the globe could hear about Jesus. You need to be giving to Jesus' mission. A great way, one way to start doing that is just go to RaiderChurch.com and start giving on a regular basis. Maybe for you that's $5 a month. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 100. Whatever that might be, start giving to Jesus' mission now and begin a regular pattern of giving to the Jesus mission. Invest in eternity. Store up treasure in heaven. Give to the Jesus mission. And see, here's what's cool about when you give at Raider Church. You're helping more people, you're helping more students just like you here at Tech hear about the good news of Jesus. Did you know since Raider Church started, a little over 2 years ago, we've now seen 350 students here at Tech commit their life to Jesus? Isn't that incredible? 350 students commit their life to Jesus. I don't know about you, but that's something worth investing in. Give to Jesus' mission. You'll store up treasure in heaven. 2, serve Jesus' church. You can store up treasure in heaven by serving Jesus' church. A great way to do that, one way to do that, is to start serving here at Raider Church. Just go again, RaiderChurch.com, fill out that form, sign up to volunteer, and we'll get you plugged in. And you can begin to serve Jesus' church and help other people experience what you have. Help us create an incredible environment here, a friendly, loving environment here so that more college students will come and hear about Jesus and have a great experience. You need to serve Jesus' church if you want to store up treasure in heaven. And then finally, you need to share Jesus' mission. If you're going to store up treasure in heaven, man, a great way to do that is to share Jesus' message. Easy way to do that is just to tell your friends about what Jesus is doing in your life. Tell them about how Jesus changed your life, how he forgave you of his sin. Tell them about what Jesus has been telling you and doing in your life since you started coming to Raider Church, and then invite them to come with you next week. You can invest in eternity. You can store up treasure in heaven just by inviting a friend to come with you to Raider Church next weekend. That's never been before. Store up treasure in heaven. See, Jesus says he wants you to store up treasure. The question is where are you storing up that treasure? Are you storing it here on earth where it won't last, or are you storing it in heaven where it will last for all of eternity? And so tonight, I've got 3 takeaways for you. Number one, real quick. Where we choose to store our treasure depends largely on where we think our home is. Where we choose to store our treasures depends largely on where we think our home is. You see, if you're storing up treasure on earth, what you're doing is you're saying, my home is here. I belong here. And so I want to store up treasures here on earth so I can enjoy them here because this is my home. But if your home's in heaven, then you want to store up treasure in heaven because that's where you're going to be for all of eternity. You see, for those of us that say, I'm a follower of Jesus, my home is heaven. With my dad. That's my home. Then it only makes sense, it only logically follows that then we would want to store up treasure for our home. We would want to invest in eternity where our home is. 2, when you store up treasure in heaven, you can properly enjoy treasure on earth. Because see, now your foundation, the foundation of your life is on Jesus. And now from that firm foundation, I can properly enjoy things in this world. But because my hope and my joy, my happiness, my peace isn't wrapped up in those things. It's wrapped up in Jesus. Now I can properly enjoy the things that God has given me, the things that God has blessed me with. I can enjoy those things because my world's not wrapped up in them. They're not my foundation. Jesus is. And then last, third, where we choose to store our treasure reveals where our heart is. Where we choose to store our treasure reveals where our heart is. You see, I want you to see Jesus' heart and why this is so important. Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 7, in verse 21. Actually, I believe it's Matthew 6. I think that's wrong. But so Jesus said this, wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. You see, I want you to hear Jesus' heart in this. Jesus is talking about this, and this matters, and this is so important because Jesus is saying, where you're storing up your treasure reveals where your heart is. And what Jesus will tell us later is he'll say, listen, you can only serve one or the other. You can either serve the things of this world, money, stuff, or you're going to serve me. You're going to follow me. You're going to pursue me. You see, when we are storing up treasures on earth, what Jesus is saying, listen, that's where your heart is. That's what you're pursuing. That's what you're after. It's not me. You can't pursue both. It's one or the other. And I want you to hear Jesus' heart in this tonight because some of the things we've talked about are practical. I want you to hear Jesus' heart and what Jesus is saying. I want your whole heart. I want all of you. I don't want you one foot in with the treasures on earth and one foot in with treasures in heaven. No, I want your whole heart. I want you to worship and serve me alone. And here's why. Because Jesus knows when you give him your whole heart, that's when you will experience the joy and the peace and the satisfaction and the fulfillment that you long for. Jesus says, give me your whole heart. Come on, go all in. Trust me. Give me your whole heart. And then, and only then, you'll find the peace and the joy and the happiness that you're looking for. And you might think, well, why is that the case? Why is it only in following Jesus and giving him my whole heart that I'll find the peace and the joy that I'm looking for? And it's because that's the way that God created you. You were designed that way. And anytime we reject Jesus and we begin to follow after our own sandcastle, all we're going to find is that castle is going to come crumbling, crashing down. It's going to let us down, and it's only going to bring pain and regret. You See, Jesus knows when we follow him and we give him our whole heart, we'll experience joy and peace. And because Jesus wants what's best for us, he's saying, listen, I want your whole heart. Where you store up treasure is revealing to Jesus. It's revealing to Jesus where your heart is. And so that's why in this series, we've been saying this. Words to an old hymn written in the 1800s. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. All other ground, every other foundation, every other pursuit, it's sinking sand. It's a sandcastle. And so Jesus says, build your life on me. Build the foundation of your life on me. I won't let you down. And when the storms of life come and when the tests come, and they will, Jesus says, I'll be there with you. I'll help you make it through it. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. Sandcastles are cool for a moment, but only the rock lasts forever. My friend Greg McClanahan's a missionary in Mexico, and he leads a huge organization that has mission groups all over the world. And he's telling me about this village that was experiencing a lot of persecution down in southern Chiapas on the border of Guatemala, where when you come to faith in Jesus, it means you could lose everything. Your house, your land that's been in your family for generations, you could lose all of it. And sure enough, this family came to faith in Jesus. And the people in the community got together and they forced them out of the city. They made them leave their home, their land that they owned for generations that was in their family. They had to leave everything. They left with absolutely nothing, just the clothes on their back. And they forced them out of the village. And so they left the village, and it was pouring rain. And Greg told me, he said, I heard about what had happened. He said, so I drove up the mountain. I was driving to this village, and on my way there, I found this family on the side of the road. It was raining. He said, I came up upon this guy who was standing there, and he said, I saw him. He was holding a piece of tin. And his family, his wife and his kids were underneath this piece of tin. He was holding it to keep them from getting rained on. They were just sitting on the side of the road. So Greg came out. They were going to help him. They were coming to pick him up, to take care of him. And Greg got out of his truck and walked up to this man in the pouring rain, holding a piece of tin to help his family not get drenched in the rain. Greg walks up to him and says, man, you've lost everything. You gave your life to Jesus and you lost everything. You got forced from your house, your land, everything. You lost everything. You got to completely start over again. Greg said, how do you feel, brother? And Greg said, the man said with a smile on his face, Greg, we have Jesus, and he's more than enough. Man, I want that to be true in my life. And I want it to be true in yours. That I have Jesus, and he's more than enough. Jesus, may that be true for all of us. God, that we wouldn't continue to lie to ourselves thinking that stuff here on this earth is going to satisfy us, is going to bring us joy or fulfillment or satisfaction. God, that's a lie. God, help us to believe your word because, as you said, your word is truth. God, help us, give us a desire to store up treasure in heaven, treasure that will last for eternity. God, give us hearts for our home, for heaven, and to store up treasure there that will last. God, we know that, and we confess tonight that all other ground besides Jesus is sinking sand. It's a sandcastle. And so, Jesus, do something in our hearts tonight where we could say, just like that man on the side of the road who lost everything, where we could say, I've got Jesus. And he's more than enough. Jesus' name, amen. Now, would you stand? We're going to sing together. And my challenge for you as you sing tonight is to remember that Jesus, I've got you, and you're more than enough. We're going to sing a new song. And this song talks about what a treasure we have in Jesus, that we can leave behind all of our regrets, all of our mistakes, and that the Father's arms are open wide to forgive us. Man, tonight, come running back to Jesus. What a treasure we've got in Him. Let's sing.